So this past week, we've been talking about, what does it mean to create a world in Unreal, and how do we achieve that? So kind of starting to wrap up that unit with this week on world creation, I'm going to be talking about how to create more of an ambient world that's enjoyable to the player, and talking about two very important things: particle effects and light. So we'll start here. So we're going to talk about the pre-built particles first, which are pretty simple. These come in every world that you have under the tutorial starter content package that we've been exploring, and it just basically provides different animations for some basic particle effects. These include spark, which can bring a player's attention. It looks like, when you have electrical wires and sparks flying. You have fire, explosion, which can be used for multiple purposes, not only demolition and stuff, but, for firing the gun to see the actual gun fire. And you have steam, both steam and smoke, which can be used for decoration, getting the player's attention, creating an environment where you have fire, or all of these different things, just to bring the player really into the world. And then you have ambient particles, which can be used to make a more calming environment for the player and just add to that world that you're trying to make. So we also have light sources, which are surprisingly really important in a game in an Unreal Engine. Maybe you've played a game before and you have to put it on low because your PC can't run it, and the light looks a little bit ugly. When you play a video game, there's something called immersion. It's this feeling that you get that you're not really sitting at your desk playing a game. It's that you're actually in the world engaging with it. This is why VR is a really big thing, because it's able to do immersion so well. You forget you're playing a video game, but you don't have to be in VR to get that feeling of immersion. You can be in, a normal PC game and still feel like you're really engaged, when you really feel like you're there in Modern Warfare, when you kind of forget about everything around you. That's good immersion. And bad light sources break immersion, because you realize, oh, hey, this is like, a video game. So it's important to choose these right light sources. There's spotlights, which act like studio spotlights and are shaped like cones. Directional lights, which are used to create shadows and emulate light that's far away. Skylight, which is used to light up everything so there's not really rich shadowy areas. And point lights, which basically just function as light bulbs. So now that we've talked so much about world creation, I just want to leave you guys with some final tips. I've gotten a lot of DM messages from you guys, or Discord DMs from you guys talking about, I have my game concept down, I have the mechanics down, but I really want to know how to make it pop. So these are my suggestions to you. The first would be to add music or sound effects to increase player immersion. Think about a game like Minecraft, right? Everybody knows the Minecraft soundtrack and how peaceful it is to, go get wood or find diamonds while you're listening to that soundtrack. It really adds to the player experience. I'd tell you guys to use particles to bring attention to events, like, if you want a player to go somewhere, which leads into another tip, which is when you're designing levels, consider the perspective of the player, which was talked about in the talk today, right? If you were a player, where would you want to go in your world? Would you want to be pushed towards the goal that you're creating for the player? It's a super important question to consider when you're designing your world. And another really big tip, especially considering the time constraint of this project, is to use assets from the Unreal Marketplace for what you want to do. So you're spending less time, in Blender or whatever, creating your own assets, and more time actually hands-on with the game design. So really quick, we're going to look at some hands-on things. The first are our light sources. So you can see here that we have our point light. When we move it around, it's just like a light bulb, right? Pretty basic. All right, cool. So we have the point light, which is pretty basic. It's just like a light bulb. You can see that it follows around and it shines on the wood like it was a light bulb. You have a studio light, which is a little bit hard to see right now because it's so bright, because I have a directional light. But basically, the closer it is to the object, the more intensity it has. So you can see that cone structure that's used to, create ambience in a world. Or in my game, I used it to create the tail lights. So it's that same cone structure. You have different particle effects. Here's fire right here. And then on top of it is smoke. So maybe if you want a player to go somewhere or make them react to an event, you can say, oh, here's smoke far out. Go to that as kind of a checkpoint or a landmark. Inside here, we have some particles. You can see those little white things floating around. Those are the ambient particles. And if we come over to this light, we can see the spark animation. So that can be used to, if you're in a dark hallway. I saw somebody earlier who used it for a broken light, right? Just to make your player feel like they're really there. I don't know who that is. So I will leave that there. But yeah, that's the basics of the particles and the different lights. So how to access the particles is to go to your content manager, just like everything else we've done so far, click on starter content, and then click on particles, and they'll all be right there. And for lights, if you go to the left-hand side, you can see lights and all the different types of lights. There's a single one that I didn't cover, which is rectangle light, just because it's really similar to a point light. But you can see it's basically a point light that's a rectangle. So people use this to emulate things like TVs, or maybe the lights you have at schools and their rectangles, just so it's not that circular area.
Berman, are you still there?
I think he left.
What's up?
Oh, never mind.
No, I don't know if you were able to keep in the back of your listening there when Ponce was going through the Unreal Engine. Did you hear any of that?
I did.
So just a quick gut reaction question to you. If you were playing around with the lights and the particles and that kind of functionality in there and getting the flow of it, like Ponce just walked through, and then you were going back and kind of thinking about your idea for your game, like, does something jump to your mind as from a design thinking perspective of how do you incorporate some basics, just some kind of things like light and particles as you're like, do you just go and kind of mess with that, or is that part of design thinking?
Yeah, I think it goes back to purpose, right? If you're going to create a visual that's going to draw somebody's attention, is it there for a purpose, or is it there for ambiance, environment, something to add a little bit of interest in what people are seeing visually as they go through your game? As you're thinking about how people interact with the environment that you're trying to create, the interactions need to be consistent. So if you look at like a World of Warcraft or some of these more immersive type worlds that come up, you're getting visual cues as an example of what you can and can't interact with, what you can interact in the environment around, what you cannot. And in these more complex, essentially 3D games, it's important to make a clear distinction between is an object just part of the environment, or is a light sparking, as an example, because I hit it with a sword, or is it sparking because I can interact with it in some way? So that there needs to be a purpose behind those interactions.
Very helpful. Thank you. Ponce, I'll let you close it out, buddy.
All right, thank you. So next week, now that you know how to create a world, and I've seen some of your guys' world, actually Aaron showed me his world, and I saw Xavier's today. You guys are already doing a really great job with utilizing these tips for world creation. So next week, I've had a few students asking me about, how do I do things like hitboxes or game interactions? So we're gonna get more into blueprints and the game mechanisms as we approach towards the final competition.